Today I'm going to be making a bow drill out of this curved piece of hazel. That's what we're going to make the bow out of. And I've also got this nice block of cedar. I'm going to saw about 1 foot off the top of this, which will mean our spindle will be about 1 foot off the floor and our hearth will be about 1 foot wide. We're just going to split this in half with an axe. So now we've got our 2 halves. We want to make sure this is bone dry, so a little test we're going to do. If we just touch it to our lips, I just press it up against my lips. Your lips are far more sensitive than fingertips, so you should be able to detect any moisture far easier just by giving a little smooch. And this is bone dry, I can tell you that. So let's start with the spindle. I'm just going to break this down a little further and I'll shave it off with my knife until I get a nice round, straight spindle. An expression comes to mind when doing this. A lumberjack, when given 8 hours to cut down a tree, will spend 6 hours sharpening his tools. What I mean by this is it's worth spending the time making sure your spindle's perfectly straight, perfectly smooth, your hearth, the notch is done perfectly. This will save you a big headache later on. So it might take a while, but once you've carved it for a bit, you should have a nice straight, rounded spindle, and I've rounded the tops as well. We're going to put that to one side and do the hearth now. So with the hearth, all we want to do is make an indenture about the same width as our spindle. The indenture is just to get it started, so this has somewhere to fit, and then we can grind away at it without it slipping out. That looks like as good a spot as any. And I'll just, with my hands, make sure that you can apply some force, and that's not slipping out, that's not going anywhere, so that's great. Now we just need a bow. So I've got my piece of hazel to which I'm tying a piece of paracord. Now when you're tying this paracord on the bow, you want it to be nice and tight, but you want it to be loose enough so you can get your spindle in, wrap it, and flick it like that. And it should push against you until you get it to 90 degrees. So we've got our bow, we've got our spindle, we've got our hearth. The one last thing we need is a bearing block. We're going to hold this with our left hand to reduce the friction between our hand and the spindle. Now I'm using a bit of green hazel for this, nice and wet, to reduce the friction. I always spit in it as well, just to lube it up nicely. Whilst we want a lot of friction between the hearth and the spindle, we want as little friction as possible between our bearing block and the spindle. You could also use a couple seashells instead of a bearing block, which is actually a lot easier. Anyway, let's get to doing some bow drill. So let's get the spindle in and we'll flick it. We'll insert it in the hole. Note, I need to make a notch in here as well to draw the ember out, but I'm not going to do that yet. First I'm just going to drill, form a nice crater, and once that's nicely established, that's when I'll cut the notch out. The position you hold is quite important. I always keep my weight above my left hand, pressing down with my knee as support. Let's do some bow drilling. I'm just doing this nice and slowly for a while to solidify the hole I've already etched in with my knife. I just want to make it deeper and more established so I can notch it and extract an ember. I don't know if you guys can make it out, but it's already starting to smoke a little. So maybe it's time to cut in the notch. Can you guys see that smoke? Maybe it's too fine. So when it comes to the notch, I want to cut out about 1/8 of this circle, just here, a little pie or quiche shape. So I've actually made this a little bit too wide. Ideally that would be a bit narrower and not as wide. It would be slightly more like this. But I think we can get away with that, so let's go ahead. Okay, so I'm going to lay down a piece of bark to catch the ember when it's ready. I've got my spindle, let's get her in the bow drill. Left foot on, applying pressure. Spindle in hole. Spit in bearing block. Let's make a fire. So it's starting to smoke. I hope you guys can make that out. I'm just gonna breathe, keep going. I wanna maintain my energy so I can keep this going, keep the friction building up, keep the heat building up, and we can hopefully turn this into an ember. So my bow drill slipped out there before I got to the ember, but that's okay because we've built up lots of really nice shavings that are really flammable. And now I just keep going. One of the most important things with bow drilling is patience. If you do mess up and your spindle slips out like that, it's okay. Just put it back in place, keep it warm, and keep going. At the end of the day, in a survival situation, nothing's going to go to plan. So you just need to keep your head about you, keep moving forwards patiently, and you'll get there in the end. All right, so we've slipped up again and we've knocked this part of the wood out, which means we can't really do it with this anymore. Part of the game, we make mistakes, but we're just going to make another hole. We'll do this a bit deeper in to give this a bit more strength, and we'll go again. So that's the second basic hole carved in. There we have notch number 2. Hopefully this works a bit better. If you find the bow is a little loose and doesn't grip the spindle, you can just grab the string, pull it tight, and that'll tighten it a bit, giving it a better grip so it spins that spindle nicely. Look at that ember go, that's picking up nicely, it's spreading. So that ember's going nicely now. What I have here, this is a piece of a cramp ball, which is a mushroom that's great for fire lighting. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to touch this cramp ball to the ember. And you can see that ember's passed to the cramp ball. This is how our ancestors used to carry their fire from place to place back when we were nomadic. I didn't have to do this, by the way. I could have just put the ember straight in our tinder bundle. I just wanted to show you this cool trick. But now let's grab this. We're gonna put it in our tinder bundle nest. Just gonna deposit it in, wrap it up. So as you can see, as the ember picks up and starts to hold, smoke starts coming out. As the smoke gets thicker and blacker, we're getting closer to a flame. And this is about to go up in flames! Well, it was kind of silly of me to hold it when it was about to burst into flames, but there you go. That's fire by friction by bow drill.